On today's show, Kevin Durant has decided to take back his trade request and remain with the Brooklyn Nets. What this means for the Miami Heat, their chances in the Eastern Conference, Tyler Hero's future, and much more. All of that coming up on today's Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on all things Miami Heat. However, you might be tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or on your favorite podcast app. Thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil, Kevin Durant, and the Nets announcing Tuesday that they have decided to move forward with their partnership, meaning that Durant no longer seeking a trade. We'll get to where this leaves the Heat in their pursuit for another superstar player. But first, David, what do you make of the announcement, and how does this impact Miami's chances in the Eastern Conference?
Well, I was totally surprised by it. I wondered, and I've been slowly kind of coming around to the realization that Kevin Durant probably wasn't going anywhere. Like it didn't seem like there was a package being offered that was ever going to be good enough that they would either have felt comfortable with. And I think we saw with the ultimatum being delivered through Shams Charania last week that it was either Steve Nash, Sean Marks, or Kevin Durant, the clearing of the front office in order to make Kevin happy, that there was just no making Kevin happy. And so I didn't know exactly how it was going to play out. I thought if they were going to make a move, they would have made one by now. There's no move for Kyrie Irving. So it seemed pretty reasonable to conclude that this might be the next best possibility was, well, let's just kind of keep it together. But yet there's so much tension, so much kind of acrimony being, going through the media, attacking various sources, trying to kind of manipulate for leverage and all these different things that we've seen play out over the last couple of weeks, that I was still very surprised that it wind up coming to this point. Having said that, I don't think any team suffered as a result more than the Miami Heat. Like the Miami Heat are in such a much worse place now as a result of the whole drama with Brooklyn, because they put all their eggs in the basket hoping to acquire a superstar, whether it was Donovan Mitchell, who we'll talk about a little bit later on, or Kevin Durant. And having fallen short of that, they didn't make any of the smaller periphery moves that they usually make in order to build out this roster. They were counting on acquiring that superstar in order to contend, to remain in title contention. And having said that, now they haven't been able to pull it off. They're not going to get Mitchell, likely. And now without Durant on the table, there's nowhere else to go. They've fallen short. They've seen every other team in the Eastern Conference continue to ascend and get better over the course of the last few weeks of the offseason. Miami has lost P.J. Tucker. They haven't been able to make those smaller moves that we talked about, and I think they're in a much worse place now than they were last season.
Yeah, I don't think that's even questionable, right? I mean, you look in the Eastern Conference, I think Miami is pretty clearly the fifth best team in the Eastern Conference, which under normal circumstances, that's cool. But this is a team that was in the Eastern Conference Finals last year, so not as cool anymore. Boston and Milwaukee, clearly the top two teams, I think, in the Eastern Conference. At this point, with Brooklyn, the move that they made, I mean, adding Royce O'Neal, I thought the T.J. Warren signing was a nice buy low move for them, and they're bringing back Ben Simmons, who presumably will play basketball at some point this season. Kyrie Irving, without the COVID mandate, will presumably play more basketball in a contract year this season. And obviously having Kevin Durant back is big. So you could put them in that same tier with Boston and Milwaukee. I wouldn't, just because the uncertainty around two of their three star players. But they're right there. And then I would put Philadelphia ahead of Miami because of the moves that they made and the fact that Miami got worse and Philadelphia got better. But, we could discuss Philadelphia and Miami. But to me, there's three teams in the East that are easily, clearly better, and then I would put Philadelphia better than the Heat as well. So that's the bad news. If I'm going to try to spin this positive a little bit, this at least provides clarity to the Miami Heat, as it does for the rest of the NBA. You mentioned Donovan Mitchell before. I would be surprised with that if within the week Donovan Mitchell wasn't traded to the Knicks. It just felt like the Durant domino had to fall first, and we've already got reports that the Knicks and the Jazz have been talking again about Mitchell. So this kind of clears the way for that to happen. And then at that point, Durant, Mitchell off the board. You and I are going to talk later about some specific names of star players that the Heat could trade for later on, but that's going to be later on, right? The Heat have something to deal with right now, and that's how do we get back to the Eastern Conference Finals? And outside of internal development, I don't really see the path. maybe there's some moves that they can make that are not of the Durant, Donovan Mitchell caliber. But yeah, this is going to come down to, are you going to get more from Bam Adebayo? Is he going to take a leap specifically offensively? Is Tyler Herro going to ascend and take another leap again the way that he took a leap last year to Sixth Man of the Year? Are you going to continue to get depth improvement from guys like Caleb Martin and Max Strus? Yeah. Can Duncan Robinson turn things around and become a valuable member of the rotation? What does Gabe Vincent look like next season? Can Jovic be a contributor as a rookie at some point? Can Omer Yurtseven be a contributor as a center at some point this season? I mean, all of these things are what Miami is now, I guess, banking on. And Victor Oladipo, by the way, too.
Right.
Like, all these guys, yeah, you kind of go down the line. You're like, okay, this guy's promising, this guy's promising, this guy's promising. But none of these guys are ever going to be Kevin Durant, right? None of these guys are ever going to be Kyrie Irving. None of these guys are going to be Ben Simmons, even. I mean, Ben Simmons is uber talented. And so I don't know.
Everybody's kind of forgotten that.
Yeah. So, yeah, one hand, again, bad. Miami, clearly not as good as probably 4 other teams in the Eastern Conference. On the other hand, at least there's some clarity now moving forward.
Yeah, that's a good point. Look, I may have, even now thinking about it, I may have been overstating things a little bit. I don't think that they're necessarily worse off. It just feels like standing pat has led to some stagnancy here.
I don't think you overstated it. I don't think you did.
I know. But I'm trying to think from our fans' perspective, our listeners' perspective. Like, I think there will be internal growth. Like, banking on that is dangerous and a risk. I think Lowry's going to get better. I think Bam, Herro, everybody that you mentioned, even all the undrafted players, Vincent, Strus, etc., even Duncan, all those guys will continue to find a way because, well, that's just what Spo does. The mastery of Spo is finding a way to get everybody to take their game to another level, and it will work. But there's still kind of just a sense that they didn't do enough this offseason because they were trying so hard to get these superstar names and they didn't make these smaller moves that they normally would have made in order to build out their roster. So I think there'll be improvement. There will be improvement overall. I think this will be a more talented team than they was last year, even without PJ Tucker. But every other team made a significant leap, and that's not enough. Like, you're not going to be able to duplicate 53 wins, catching people by surprise with Max Strus. Like, he's on the scouting report now. Right. They know who Gabe Vincent is. Right. You're not going to be able to sneak him in there and go, well, what does this guy do? Well, when he hits a 3 in your face, you're going to know exactly what he does. They know that now. So you're not going to be able to take teams by surprise the way you did last year.
Yeah, I mean, both things could be true, right? The Heat could theoretically get better, but they could still not be as good relative to the other teams in the Eastern Conference. Right. They could just not get back to the Eastern Conference Finals. Just look at it last year. Like, Boston was the better team in the East, right? They made it to the NBA Finals. Miami didn't. Like, we could debate that, but just on paper, they were the best team in the Eastern Conference because they made the Finals, okay? Milwaukee, you could argue that they should have beat Boston if Chris Middleton doesn't get hurt. Barring injury, Milwaukee, I think, is better than Miami. They've got Giannis, they got Middleton, they've got Jrue Holiday, they got depth. They're good. Yeah. Brooklyn, and I've said this 100 times, but you play out last year 1,000 times. 999 times, it is not worse than the year that Brooklyn had last year, right? That it was the ultimate worst-case scenario for the Brooklyn Nets. So just based on that alone, there's going to be some sort of improvement, right? Just if you get back to a little bit of what an average season ought to be for a team as talented as Brooklyn. And then we could quibble with the quibble with the Philadelphia thing, but they add PJ Tucker, taking him away from Miami. I think he's an ideal fit there. Maybe you don't like the contract, but for 1 year, that's an improvement for that team. Joel Embiid is awesome. James Harden, I think, is going to be better, or at least be better for Philadelphia than what they had for the balance of their entire season, considering that they got Harden at the trade deadline last year. You add some nice pieces to that roster, guys that they acquired during the offseason in the draft and things like that. Tyrese Maxey taking another step forward. I think that's going to be a good team. Yeah. And so
those teams are going to have internal development too. Like, we can't just bank on Miami's. Yeah, so they're going to continue to get better on paper.
It's not a surprise that of the teams, when Kevin Durant rescinded the trade request, Brooklyn's odds got better in the Eastern Conference. Milwaukee's odds and Boston's odds, well, Milwaukee's odds stayed the same. Boston's odds got slightly worse, but not to a huge degree. They're still, I think, one of the favorites, if not the favorite in the entire NBA. And Miami's got substantially worse. And that, to me, says a lot. Number one, Miami was sort of tied to Kevin Durant, right? Where they were one of the favorite landing spots. So if they get Durant and Brooklyn does not have Durant, then Brooklyn falls down the odds. Miami's odds soar, and I think that was a little bit baked in for people that were trying to get in on the early betting on where Durant could or could not go. But now that Miami does not have Kevin Durant and does not seem to have a logical path to getting another superstar, certainly nobody of Kevin Durant's caliber, that's why you see their odds fall. And that's why ultimately, like you said, who's the star on the table? This is sort of what Miami has now. This is what they're dealing with. We will talk about some other moves that they could potentially make on the margin. Smaller moves, not superstar moves, but moves that could still improve this team nonetheless. Next here on Locked On Heat. But first, today's show is brought to you by Rocket Money. If you keep on saying that you need to make a budget but never do, if somehow you keep missing credit card payments, if you're afraid to look at your bank statements, then it's time for you to take back control of your financial life. Meet Rocket Money, formerly Truebill, our favorite financial app and one that you've heard us talk about on this show before. So why did Truebill change its name to Rocket Money? We'll tell you what we heard. Truebill, now backed by Rocket Companies, has grown from a bill management app into a full-on personal finance empowerment tool that helps over 3.4 million people with budgeting, lowering bills, canceling subscriptions, and more, saving each of their members on average $700 a year. And with all that growth comes the next evolution in Truebill's story and a new name. Bottom line, Rocket Money is everything I've loved about Truebill, but with a fresh new look and feel. Start canceling your unused subscriptions and save money at rocketmoney.com/lockedonnba. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedonnba, or download the app from the App Store or Google Play Store. Back here with Locked On Heat, talking about Kevin Durant deciding that he does not want to be traded, and he and the Nets deciding that they are going to move forward in their partnership.
Let me ask you a quick question. Let me ask you a quick question. I'm just thinking about this now. Do you think it lasts? Look, I mean, there's always a chance for drama or something along those lines to break up. And look, Kyrie's still on the last year of his deal, right? He accepted the 1-year extension. Do you think they keep that team together throughout the entire season?
It's something I wanted to talk about, and I kind of had it earmarked for later in the show, but let's just do it now.
All right, sorry.
This means nothing. This means nothing in terms of Kevin Durant's long-term viability in Brooklyn, right? I think for now he's in Brooklyn, and I think for the next several months he'll be in Brooklyn. And I would bet that he finishes the season in Brooklyn. And I'm betting that because I'm betting on Brooklyn being way better than they were last year, and just relative to that, vibes, feelings, etc., being better within that building than they were last season. Kyrie Irving being a full-time player, at least for now, until he finds another excuse not to play basketball games. Ben Simmons presumably coming back from the back injury and all the other stuff happening with him. Yeah, I just think the vibes will be better, and then Kevin Durant will at least give it another year. But then, yeah, Kyrie Irving, it's on a 1-year deal, right? And I think the idea here is that Kevin Durant plays, the Brooklyn Nets are much better, Ben Simmons plays, Kyrie Irving, they sign him to an extension next year. They don't have to worry about that games played minimum guarantee where they reportedly wanted him to commit to playing 60 games. And he was like, you want me to play 60 games in order to get paid? No, thanks. He wasn't down for that. But I think that's the idea, is that things turn and that Kevin Durant stays. But I was listening to Locked On Nets before we got on here, and they sort of asked the same question. Do you think that Kevin Durant finishes his career in Brooklyn? And one of the hosts went so far as to say he doesn't even know if he finishes the 4-year contract. I think that's a foregone conclusion. Like, I mean, he's just so prone to, I don't know that's the whole thing. That's what stood out the whole time of this is like, what makes Kevin Durant happy? I don't think Kevin Durant knows what makes him happy. And so there's going to be something down the road in the next 4 years where he's going to say, you know what, I want to change the pace, change the scenery. I think that's absolutely 100% likely to happen, that he won't stay there for the entirety of his contract, certainly, and not to the end of his career, for sure. And the thing is, he's turning 34 years old, so who knows what the value of Kevin Durant is a year, 2 years, 3 years down the line, right? Who knows? And it won't. I'll tell you this: it won't be what the Brooklyn Nets were trying to get for him this last round of trade demands. But who knows? Like, there is a path for Miami to one day have Kevin Durant on their roster, so we can't rule that out. But with that in mind, whether it's Kevin Durant or not, the Heat are still very much in the superstar acquisition mode, right? They made this plan. They let PJ Tucker walk away for nothing. They decided not to part with any draft picks before Kevin Durant demanded a trade, before it was clear that the Jazz were going to make Donovan Mitchell available, right? Like this, nothing changes. Kevin Durant asking for a trade and then rescinding that trade request has not changed Miami's strategy. They are going to still keep the powder dry in the hopes that another superstar shakes loose. And you and I have some names that we'll get to later on in the show. But for now, what this also means is that if you're Miami, that you can't really part with first-round picks still. There's other players out there. Harrison Barnes, John Collins, Miles Turner, the names that we keep hearing that are just sort of perennially on the trade block that will probably require at least a first-round pick in order to get those players. If you're the Heat, I don't think that you can make those moves if it means parting with a first-round pick, because you're still trying to keep those first-round picks in the chamber in the case that another superstar shakes loose. What do you think?
I think they have to make the trade. I really do. I understand what you're saying, but nothing's ever a guarantee. And I know waiting around for something to happen. And look, you got this great opportunity this offseason to acquire either Mitchell or KD, or maybe even Kyrie Irving if there was ever actually any interest from the Heat front office. Having said that, you fell short. You're 0 for 3 now. And you've already got a superstar or a star, whatever you want to categorize him as, on the roster. And you've got a window that's quickly closing. Because how much longer can Jimmy Butler be able to play at the level that we saw him last year in the playoffs? I had questions, even following the bubble, seeing what he did during the bubble and wondering, whether he was going to be able to maintain that the following season with the COVID-shortened season, the weird schedule and everything else like that. He played at MVP level for most of the regular season when he was available, but we saw him succumb to injury and just a great Bucks defense in the playoffs last season. And then following that, yes, he was great last year, but how much more can you continue to count on Jimmy Butler having to be able to put up a 40-point triple-double in order to, eke past an Atlanta Hawks or Philadelphia 76ers team or even a Boston team, et cetera? You've got this roster now. You've got a chance to win now. You've got to take advantage of it. Make the move for that secondary, tertiary level star player or even just a decent role player, because you want to be able to capitalize on what you know. If you're not getting any production out of Duncan, well, as cold as it may seem, find a way to get something out of the position. Find a way to get something out of the players that you have in the roster that might not play, and get somebody like Harrison Barnes or anybody. I don't even know. At this point, you've just got to be able to make a move. Not just to make a move for the move's sake, but to build a better roster, a more complete roster. That 4 spot, you cannot count on Caleb Martin. It's just not realistic. He's too small. As athletic as he is, as nice a person he is, and I love Caleb, I love his story, I want him to succeed. He's just not going to succeed at the power forward. There's no way. He's going to get victimized. He's going to get in foul trouble. You don't have to apologize
for that. He's 6'5". You don't have to apologize for it. But he is right now the best option that they have, because you can't play Jimmy Butler at full time at the 4. And I know that idea has been out there, but you said, you want to play Jimmy Butler at the 4 full time and then still expect him to put up 40 and 10 in the playoffs every single game in order. The one part I will push back against is this idea that, hey, they need to maximize this window. I don't know that the Heat agree with that right now. I think they feel like they need to maximize the Jimmy Butler window. But I think they are willing to take a step back this season. And why I say that is because it kind of looks like they have. It kind of looks like they have decided, hey, we're not going to make those marginal moves because we're holding on to our assets in order to make the big move. Because I think what Miami is thinking is that even a marginal move doesn't get us better than Boston, Milwaukee, Brooklyn, Philadelphia. It doesn't get us better. It doesn't make us the favorite in the East. So why make that marginal move if that is going to take us out of the running for that big superstar move that does make us the favorite, right? And these first-round picks are finite, especially for the Miami Heat. Like, if you lose one first-round pick, all of a sudden your package is so much worse than it could have been. The Heat are not working with much. They are working with a maximum of 3 first-round picks that they can use in the future, and that's if they lift protections off the OKC pick. And for every Heat fan saying, well, if you just wait another year, another first-round pick gets unlocked for them. Well, guess what? It does too for all the other 29 teams in the NBA too. So that doesn't have anything to do with this. I understand. I think the Heat need to try to figure out a way to be creative and upgrade the roster. I don't think that they can afford to part with another first-round pick if they're going to do it. If you want Harrison Barnes, if you want John Collins, if you want Miles Turner, name the player. If that player is going to cost a first-round pick, even though we all agree that that player would be a nice fit and make the Heat better in the short term, right now, and even in the long term potentially, I don't think you can do it. Now, can Miami upgrade that roster without including a first-round pick? A lot of people want to. You mentioned Duncan Robinson's name. That's the name. That's a name that might have had to be included in a Kevin Durant or a Kyrie Irving or a Donovan Mitchell trade because of his salary. I wonder if the Heat were holding on to Duncan Robinson this entire time, despite maybe other moves being out there, in order to even fill the power forward spot. Not with a big name, but with a name that's better than 6'5" Caleb Martin. And does this now become an option? Every Heat fan on earth wants them to trade for John Collins. I don't know that that's feasible. I don't know that that's feasible right now. I actually floated the idea of Duncan Robinson to an Atlanta Hawks executive. I said, hey, Duncan Robinson for John Collins, and I got laughed at. So that's not going to happen if you're not including a first-round pick. That said, I think the Hawks are listening to offers for John Collins, but Duncan Robinson ain't going to get it done. But could Duncan Robinson get you something worse than John Collins? Could that go get you, I don't know, a Bojan Bogdanovic, a Kelly Olynyk, a Davis Bertans? Can it give you something like that? And is that enough of an upgrade? Is that at that power forward spot? I would argue probably, especially if you think Max Strus has fully ascended Duncan Robinson on the depth chart, and there might not be that much playing time for him anyway. But that's sort of the decision that the Heat would have to make.
So what would it take to pry Collins off of there? Like, I mean, based on your conversation, would it be Duncan and a first, or
it would be picks? Yeah, I mean, Duncan Robinson for salary filler is fine, but the Hawks would be looking for picks. But even now, I think the price that the Hawks are looking, it's not just any pick. It's not just any pick, especially a Miami Heat pick. It might not have that much more value to a Hawks team. Now, the Hawks did part with a lot of draft capital to get DeJounte Murray. So I think part of their thinking would be, okay, if we can just sort of recoup some of that draft capital in John Collins trade, then the DeJounte Murray price doesn't look as expensive for us. But those Heat picks they're not great picks, right? Like the way that Heat picks are viewed around the NBA is this team always finds a way to be competitive. That's the great part about being the Miami Heat. The downside about being Miami Heat is everybody has so much confidence in you winning every year that nobody thinks your picks are going to be in the top 10 ever, and people don't really care about those picks that much.
I still think they have to make a move. Like, I'm just thinking about it. Like, you know, we can argue about.
If you think they have to make a move if it means using a first-round pick. Let's be clear about this.
Yeah, because it's.
I think they have to make a move without the first-round pick. You think they have to make a move with the first-round pick? That's where
you have to make the best move possible. How about that? We have to make the best move possible. I mean, what kind of player can you possibly get without including a first-round pick? A marginal player that's not, I mean, a slight improvement or upgrade over Caleb Martin at the 4, maybe. But if that's the case, I just don't think that's enough either. Like Kelly Olynyk, fine, great player, love Kelly. You know, I think he can fit well here, et cetera. But I don't know that makes this team that much better. Like he's great as a depth guy, you know, somebody to add onto the bench or something along those lines. But I think you need a starter quality player that can raise your ceiling ever so slightly, because I think you've got enough. I keep coming back to the idea that if you get those kind of improvements, and I know it's a risk banking on better year from Tyler, Bam, Kyle, etc., even all the role players, and you continue to have Jimmy is your star. That's why you go all in now. Like you can't just afford to let all the other teams pass you by. And if it means making a smaller move around the margins, and if you cost you a first-round pick, well, you know what? Who knows when that next superstar shakes loose? Who knows whether they're interested? You can't just wait for those things to happen. And yeah. I think you have to be able to make a. You've got your star now. Like there was those years of mediocrity in between the big three and when the acquisition of Jimmy Butler. Like I think the timetable all changed when Jimmy came, and they wound up going to the finals that year, maybe because of COVID or the bubble. Whatever argument you want to have is fine, but they weren't counting on being that good that quickly, and yet here they are. You've got to go all in now. You've got to go all in now, because who knows when the next time you get a superstar.
I think that's what they're trying to do, is go all in now, because they promised Jimmy Butler that they would get him that other star player, right? And I think that's what they view as all in. Is it's even if we take a step back in the short term, we're still going all in because we're holding on to all our chips, and at some point we're going to be able to push them all onto the table. That's what we're going to talk about next. What player could be worth all the chips that the Heat are holding? But first, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your betting needs. Find your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They have you covered. So let's see here. The adjusted NBA title odds via BetOnline. Celtics are at the top at plus 500, followed by the Bucks at plus 600. The Golden State Warriors, the defending champions, at plus 700. And here is where we have the Brooklyn Nets Now with Kevin Durant committed, at least committed in quotes, at plus 750. The Clippers tied with the Nets at plus 750. Miami moved all the way down to plus 1,600 on BetOnline. BetOnline. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. It's BetOnline, where the game starts. At Locked On Heat on Twitter and on Instagram, lockedonheat@gmail.com. We want to get to a mailbag soon, send those questions in on any of those places. You can also comment here on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe and like our videos on YouTube. Getting back to the Kevin Durant conversation here, obviously the Heat had been hoping to get in the mix for Kevin Durant. They had this entire time refused to include Bam Adebayo in that trade. It felt like the entire deal was sort of based on around a package of Duncan Robinson for salary purposes, Tyler Herro as the young blue chip player, and then all of the first round picks and pick swaps that they could possibly include. That deal was not good enough for the Brooklyn Nets. No deal was good enough for the Brooklyn Nets. Kevin Durant did not get his way. He rescinds the trade request. He's coming back, at least for now, to Brooklyn. So where does that leave the Miami Heat? That's what we're talking about. If they really do want still that superstar player, and to go back to the conversation we were just having, David, I don't disagree with anything you said. I think that the model that the Heat could follow is the 2019 Toronto Raptors, where we have our superstar, top 10 player in Kawhi Leonard, and in this case for Miami, it would be Jimmy Butler. You've got really great supporting players. You have Kyle Lowry, who was on the 2019 Raptors. You have Bam Adebayo. You have Tyler Herro. Could you just fill out the roster with a bunch of guys who are just really solid and can just help lift Jimmy Butler in a way that maybe these other guys aren't now? And Miami has so much depth that maybe there's a way to take one or two or three of these guys and sort of package them and go ahead and upgrade a spot, maybe the power forward spot, the backup center position. Maybe go get somebody else in the backcourt. I don't know what it would be. I don't disagree with anything that you're saying there. I'm just trying to read the tea leaves in what this front office is actually going to do, and it just feels like they're star chasing. And so with that in mind, who would be the next star that becomes available? It's not Kevin Durant. It's not Donovan Mitchell. Are we at the point where we're coming back to Bradley Beal? Because when he re-signed the contract, David, with that extension, with the no trade clause, I said it then, I'll say it again now, that trade clause should be relabeled the anywhere but Miami clause, meaning that I am not going to get traded anywhere but Miami. That's to me, the only team that Bradley Beal would waive that no trade clause for is the Miami Heat. Does that become an option when the Wizards are not as good as maybe the Wizards are hoping they are by the trade deadline? Because we all know that that's not going to be the case, right, in Washington. So is that something that they could possibly circle back on at the trade deadline? Because at that point, all the players that they re-signed or signed in the offseason will be tradable, and they might have enough salary to get to Bradley Beal, plus all the draft picks that they have yet to use.
I like Bradley. I've said this before, but I also don't think he's the move to make. I don't think he's that kind of upgrade that you're looking for. I don't know that he represents such a huge improvement over the starting two-guard Tyler Herro. I think given his youth, given everything else that we've seen from Tyler in the past, I think the separation between him and Bradley Beal isn't so great that you don't want to necessarily pay, $50 million a year to Bradley Beal?
And given that Tyler Herro will probably be making less than half of what Bradley Beal is paying and be that much younger. Right. Good point.
Yeah, I just don't think that's the move there. I think if there's a superstar that might eventually shake free, I would keep my eye on Joel Embiid. I think that's the possibility there, because if the Philadelphia experiment doesn't work out, and if Harden, despite his sacrifice this offseason, et cetera, I think the connection between Joel and Jimmy is so strong that he'd make a push to try and come to Miami.
Are you telling me that Joel, a player might not super enjoy playing with James Harden? Is that what you're trying to say?
We've seen evidence of this in the past. Yeah. I wanted to suggest something. I know we're kind of leaning towards a superstar angle here, but I know it's one of the things that I've seen being bandied about there as a potential trade, on the lesser level acquisitions there. What do you think of the Nikola Vucevic prying him out of Chicago?
Yeah,
No?
this is off that Sean Devaney report for Heavy,
Yeah.
which was not so much a report as it is sounds like sort of a
Mentioning things.
executive over a beer,
Yeah.
just having an idea the way that you and I would on this podcast. So
Yeah.
I put no stock into that actually being a thing. But
Yeah.
Vucevic is a player. He's on a, you know, he sort of fills the position in need if the Heat are comfortable moving Bam to power forward and Vucevic at the center spot. He spaces the floor. He's sort of that guy if you were going to move Bam, kind of the prototype of a center who would fit next to Bam. Really good rebounder in a way that would help this team. Not a great defender. That's the thing. And he is on an expiring contract, which is potentially why Chicago would be willing to move off of him in the first place. I just don't know what it would cost. It feels like it would be something more than Duncan Robinson, right? But it would have to, but not worth something like Tyler Herro. So
definitely not. Yeah.
So and that the Heat don't have anything in between those two assets, right? I mean, would they do it for Duncan Robinson and a pair of draft picks or a first round pick? It doesn't feel like to me Chicago that wants to make the playoffs again would just, even though he's on an expiring contract, would be like, Duncan Robinson and a first round pick. And if you're Miami, even one first round pick feels like too much for a guy who's on an expiring contract again. Right. And no way would you touch 2 first round picks. So I just don't see the road to that, but it's an interesting concept. I wonder, all this talk about Jaylen Brown being in every single trade rumor, does he eventually get frustrated with Boston and say, get me out of here? And if that's the case, I mean, that might be a player that the Heat don't even have to trade for because he'll be an unrestricted free agent in 2024. And so Miami could potentially clear out cap space by then to go get him. But that's one name, but that's 2 years from now. That's, I guess, past the Jimmy, not definitively within the Jimmy Butler championship window. So the Jaylen Brown thing, while that would be sick down the road, doesn't really answer the question of how do we maximize the Jimmy Butler window. I have 2 more names for you.
Oh, okay.
And they both play for the same team. Draymond Green and Klay Thompson. The Golden State Warriors are going to have to trade somebody. They're going to have to trade somebody. Joe Lacob has basically already said that they will move somebody, that they're not going to pay Steph, Klay, Draymond, Jordan Poole, who's up for the same extension, in the same extension year, in the same draft class that Tyler Herro is up for. They still got Wiseman, who has barely played but is going to be extension eligible within the next year. You've got Kuminga, who they love, Moses Moody, who they love. They're going to have to pay those 2 guys at some point down the line. They have already, and Andrew Wiggins. Andrew Wiggins, who's going to be an unrestricted free a free agent this upcoming summer, and they're going to have to decide whether or not they want to pay him or not. And you could argue that he's probably more valuable to them right now as a young piece at that wing spot than even Draymond Green or Klay Thompson, though I wouldn't go that far. But I've seen that argument out there. They're going to have to move somebody. And it sounds like it's going to have to be Draymond, Klay, Wiggins, or Jordan Poole. Jordan Poole doesn't answer any needs for Miami, so whatever. Yeah. Draymond would be an interesting option at power forward. Klay Thompson would be a very interesting option to space the floor next to Jimmy Butler, although paying him $40 million a year, I don't know what he's going to look like. He looked okay at times in the playoffs, right? But is that sustainable? Andrew Wiggins is interesting. I don't know that he's quite that caliber player that Miami is looking for, as much as, what is that, the BTS fans or whatever that was, the people that voted him onto the All-Star game, would maybe think that he is. But Draymond, Klay Thompson, if one of those guys ends up being the odd man out in Golden State, what do you think of those 2 names in Miami?
I don't think they're worth exploring. Like, I mean, obviously championship experience. They've got all the intangibles that the Heat traditionally love and everything else like that. But I just don't think that either of them are, again, that significant upgrade. Like, that's just not. Miami's trading for an aging superstar that's frustrated and hasn't won, or a young superstar that's on the rise, a la Donovan Mitchell. Neither of those fit the description of Draymond. Draymond, a star in that system. I think he would be a great fit here. I love Draymond. At the same time, I just don't think he makes this team that much better. Like, you'd have to lean completely into a defense mode, which would be great. Like, to be a fearsome defensive team. Maybe that's something that would appeal to the Heat front office. I just don't see that as being a realistic option of paying them the kind of money that it seems like it's likely to take. I don't think they are. What about Devin Booker?
Is he leaving Phoenix?
Why wouldn't he? Like, you didn't win much. You didn't win much until Chris Paul came along. maybe you like Monty Williams, you like the front office, you're a star there, but you know there was a connection between Booker and the front office at some point, the Heat front office. When they were looking to draft him, et cetera. That was still a big mistake, perhaps, that they didn't. But either way, um, I think that there's still a connection down the road there. I think that you could look into that. I mean, I don't know how realistic it is, but if he goes increasingly frustrated, like if this window closes, if Paul winds up not being able to take him over the next hump, and he winds up retiring over the next couple seasons, and who knows what you're getting out of DeAndre Ayton, or even if you wind up looking to move Ayton at some point, what if he grows increasingly frustrated with being just shy of being able to continue to win? Why wouldn't you explore or kick the tires on a potential Devin Booker trade?
You mentioned Devin Booker, and my initial reaction was, you're crazy. Don't even bring that up. You're just going to bring Heat fans' hopes up. But as you talked about it, I think you brought my hopes up. Because, look, Devin Booker is... You said, why wouldn't he? And I said, because, and I was going to say, because he's the favorite son of Phoenix. He is the most popular player there since anything. Steve Nash, right?
Sure.
But, again, yeah, today's NBA, that doesn't really mean a whole lot. James Harden was the favorite player in Houston after 6 years there, and he was like, nah, I don't care. And he left. Now, I'm not saying Devin Booker is James Harden. Everybody's got their own personality, but today's NBA, you never know. You never know. Right. And if there is going to be a organization that can somehow push away their star player with just sheer incompetence, wouldn't it be one owned by Robert Sarver? It kind of feels like it might be. And so Chris Paul getting older. He's not going to be able to carry that team the way that he has in the past. DeAndre Ayton, who knows? I mean, they didn't seem totally stoked on his upside. That's why, right? Who knows what that leads to? Who knows if he gets so frustrated that they eventually try to trade him? Maybe they do ultimately just try to trade him anyway because they don't value him that much apparently. So let's say the Ayton things go south. Chris Paul ages out of whatever window this is, and now Devin Booker's looking around, and it's like, yeah, I got Mikal Bridges, I got Cam Johnson. These are nice players, but not co-stars, right? Like really nice supplementary role players, but not co-stars. And by the way, you traded all your draft picks, so we don't have any of those available either. So and how are we going to get free agents to Phoenix when we don't want to pay even our own players? So I maybe could see that down the line. The question is, when does that happen? Is that happening within the next couple of years? It could. I mean, the NBA, 2 years in the NBA is an eternity. So
I could see that.
I like it. It doesn't feel like it qualifies as realistic, but it doesn't feel like it qualifies as completely, like La La Land impossible either, right?
Nothing's impossible. Like I really, I mean, that's the whole thing. Like I mean, Jimmy could ask for a trade at the end of the season. He's like, I came here because Dwayne sold me on Heat culture. I've been a part of something special, etc. And he's like, Pat, I believed in you. I thought we could get it done, and we didn't get it done. So then he asked out for a trade. Like, I mean, we saw James Harden ask for a trade out of 3 teams within less than a year. Like, this is just the future of the NBA. It's like when players want to be able to win, they want to be able to be happy, they want to be able to win a championship, they want to be able to get paid. Not all those things can be received and gotten in the same place within the same time frame. So you have to make a decision as to what's your biggest priority. So at this point, Booker getting paid, he's happy in Phoenix for sure, but pretty soon you're going to start to hear the empty calorie stock for the first few seasons of his career where he was just putting up all these points and not getting it done, right? Not until Chris Paul did. You don't think that sticks in his craw, that to hear that he's an all-star level player, an all-NBA level player? It's like, well, you didn't win anything until Chris Paul at age 45 came over here and dragged your ass to the playoffs. Like, that's got to hurt. He's like, oh yeah, well, I'll show you. I'll go to Miami and I'll lead that team to the finals. That's all I'm saying. Putting it out there.
Kendall Jenner is a fan of Miami. Just saying. Just saying.
Please, let's not do that. Let's not go that route.
Hey, just ask Carmelo Anthony how much the wives have to say in player movement. Just saying. We'll continue to carve up this Kevin Durant topic in future shows. We want to do a mailbag here as well. Make sure that you leave your mailbag questions under the comments section here on YouTube. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. You can email them, lockedonheat@gmail.com, Twitter, Instagram, @lockedonheat. And if you leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, we'll guarantee that we get to your questions. So that's one way to make sure that your question gets answered in our next mailbag. But that'll do it for us today. Remember to like and subscribe, Locked On Heat on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. For your second listen, get up to date on the latest news and rumors in the NBA in just 30 minutes every day with Locked On NBA. Locked On NBA, your daily NBA update in just 30 minutes. Thanks for joining me, David.
You got it, Wes.